His fingers closed around her jaw. Not gently. The grip was hard enough to force her face upward, hard enough to make her eyes water, and he held it there, making sure she had no choice but to look directly at him. "Do you understand?" he said, his voice almost pleasant. "What you cost me?" Adise said nothing. She kept her eyes steady on his face, even though every instinct in her body was screaming at her to look away. The man, the business associate, the one who had arranged the poisoning in the club, the one who had been sitting at that corner table when she'd kissed Park Jisoo and watched his own plan collapse, let go of her jaw with a sharp movement, like she was something he'd picked up and decided wasn't worth holding. He began to pace around her in slow circles. She tracked the sound of his footsteps because she couldn't always see him. 5 years, he said. 5 years I spent building toward that moment. Do you know what it takes to acquire untraceable poison from 4 separate sources and combine them correctly? The chemists I paid, the time I spent, the contacts in 3 countries I burned through just to make that one glass of whiskey perfect. He paused behind her. She couldn't see his face. And you walked across a restaurant and kissed him. She said nothing. A waitress, he continued. A foreign girl nobody knew. Nobody who should have mattered. He came around her left side, stopped, looked down at her. And yet here we are. I'm sorry I disrupted your murder, Adise said. His eyes sharpened. Not sorry enough, he said. She had been in this chair for, she didn't know how long. Long enough that the rope on her wrists had stopped hurting and started burning. Long enough that the fear had cycled through several stages and arrived somewhere that felt almost like anger. She was going to hold on to the anger. Anger was useful. Anger kept you present. He pulled a chair close and sat directly in front of her, elbows on his knees, studying her with the patient, particular focus of someone who had all the time in the world and intended to use it. "Let me tell you something about Park Jisoo," he said. She kept her face still. "A man like him doesn't choose people," he said. "He acquires them, uses them. You think he married you because something special happened in that restaurant." He tilted his head. "He married you because you were convenient, because you handed him the perfect narrative, the loyal server who saved his life. Do you know what that story does for his image? Foreign investors, Western partners. A black woman on his arm tells every room he walks into that Park Jisoo is cosmopolitan, progressive, untouchable." The contempt in his voice was precise, surgical. "You were never a choice. You were a strategy." The words landed somewhere soft. Adise pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth and said nothing. "And a man who actually valued you," he continued, leaning forward slightly, "would already be here. He has the resources. He has the people. He has the contacts to find anyone in Seoul in under an hour." He paused. "So where is he, Adise?" Silence. "Where is Park Jisoo?" She looked at him steadily. "You're wrong about him," she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, but it didn't shake. He smiled. "The door is right there. Walk me through exactly how he burst through it." She said nothing. He stood, walked to the long table against the wall where the case was laid out. Neat, organized, the kind of organized that meant practice. He reached in and lifted something out, turned it once in his fingers. He started walking toward her. "Just so," she thought. Please find me. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me. Do you trust Park Jisoo? Do you think he's coming? Because what happens in this room is about to test everything Adise is made of. Stay with us. Like this video if you came back for part 2. This family showed out for part 1, and I see every single one of you. 12 hours earlier, Incheon Port District. The warehouse sat at the edge of the water like it had grown there, rusted and enormous. The kind of building that appeared on no official maps and hosted conversations that no one recorded. Corrugated metal walls. Loading bays that hadn't seen legitimate cargo in years. 3 men outside who were working very hard at looking like they weren't afraid. They were afraid. Park Jisoo's car came to a stop at the entrance at 4:47 in the morning. The guards didn't move. Not because they were brave. Because their bodies had made the decision to stop working properly the moment that particular black car appeared at the end of the access road. Because everyone in this corner of the city's underworld knew that car. Knew the license plate. Knew what it meant when it appeared somewhere unannounced at dawn. Jisoo stepped out without hurry. He straightened his jacket, looked at the warehouse the way a man looks at something he is deciding whether to purchase or demolish. He had not yet decided which. He had left Seoul before 3 a.m. He had told no one where he was going. He had not told Madame Yun, who would have worried. He had not told his head of security, who would have insisted on bringing 20 men and turning it into a production. And he had not told Adise, because what he was about to do was supposed to be a surprise. Tonight, when he came home, he was going to take her to the Han River. He had been planning it for 2 weeks, since the night in the kitchen when she'd said, quietly, almost to herself, not really asking for anything, that she had passed the Han River hundreds of times since arriving in Korea and had never once stopped to just sit beside it. He had been thinking about that sentence for 14 days, about the particular way she'd said it, not with complaint or self-pity, just with the honest observation of someone who had been moving too fast for too long to stop. He intended to stop that tonight. But first, he walked past the guards without acknowledging them. One of them found his voice. "Sir, this is Private Prop." Jisoo looked at him. Just looked. The man went quiet immediately. Inside, word had already spread ahead of him. He could always tell by the way movement in a building changed when he entered. The way every person stood slightly straighter. The way noise dropped. Weapons disappeared into waistbands. Postures went rigid. The particular brand of tension that visited people when something genuinely dangerous arrived. The man in charge came out from the back office. Heavy set, mid-50s, the build of someone who had survived things that should have killed him. Scarred jaw, careful eyes, trying very hard not to look the way he felt, which was like a man who had just realized the floor beneath him was thinner than he thought. He bowed low. "Mr. Park." His voice was controlled. "Barely. This is unexpected. How can we help you?" "Adise Nwosu," Jisoo said. "Her debt. I want the full amount." The man blinked. Whatever he had been expecting, it wasn't that. "It currently stands at $480,000, sir. With accumulated fees and penalties, closer to $580. Jisoo set the briefcase on the nearest table. He clicked it open. The room went very quiet in a specific way. The way rooms go quiet when a significant amount of cash appears. The stacks were neat, organized, almost architectural. 700,000, Jisoo said. The debt is settled. Everything she owes from the beginning to today is finished. Everything her brother owes connected to this organization is finished. Every number, every agreement, every threat, done. The room had stopped breathing. The man stared at the money. His men were staring. $700,000 in cash had a way of making intelligent thought briefly impossible. Then the man looked up, and something shifted in his expression. Something calculated. The look of someone who had just seen an opportunity and was deciding whether to reach for it. "Mr. Park," he said carefully, "this is very generous. But we do have to consider the inconvenience of the time spent." Jisoo's hand moved. Not to hit him, just to grip his collar. One hand. The knuckles went white. The man's feet left the floor by approximately 2 inches. "Let me be very clear about something," Jisoo said. His voice was low, unhurried, almost conversational. It was the most frightening voice in the room, and everyone knew it. "I drove here before sunrise. I came in person to your building, to your territory, with more money than your entire operation has generated this quarter. I am giving you every possible opportunity to make the correct decision." He pulled the man slightly closer. "Take it." The man's bravado had evaporated so completely it was almost sad. His throat worked. "Yes, sir. Of course. The debt is settled in full. No further." Jisoo released him. Stepped back. Straightened his jacket. "And if I ever receive any information that anyone connected to your organization has approached her, spoken her name, or come within 100 meters of her or her family," he paused, "I will not send a message. I will come personally, and what I bring the second time will not be a briefcase." The man nodded rapidly. "Understood, sir. Completely understood." Jisoo turned to leave. He was almost at the door when the man spoke again. "Mr. Park." His voice had changed. The performance was gone. What was left underneath was the sound of someone who understood they were about to deliver terrible news to a dangerous person and had decided that honesty was the only option that gave them any chance of survival. "There's something you need to know." Jisoo stopped. She's gone, sir. Your wife. They took her this morning. A pause. We received a contact last night. Your former business associate. The one from the poisoning at the club. He reached out directly. He offered twice the debt value. He said he wanted her specifically. Another pause. For personal reasons. The air in the warehouse changed. Every man in the room felt it. The particular atmospheric shift that happens when something dangerous becomes something lethal. Several of them took involuntary steps backward. Jisoo turned around very slowly. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His fist connected with the man's face before either of them fully processed that it was happening. The sound echoed off the metal walls. The man stumbled sideways into 2 of his own people. Jisoo stood over him, chest rising and falling. He wanted to take the building apart. He wanted to work through it room by room until there was nothing standing. He could feel the rage running through his body like current, looking for somewhere to go. He checked his watch instead. She had been gone for approximately 3 hours. He turned. Where? He said. His voice was flat. Empty. The kind of empty that was worse than any shout. His private estate, the man said from the floor, still holding his face. Songbuk District. I have the exact address, sir. We can. Jisoo was already walking. He was in the driver's seat of his car before his security team had fully registered that he was moving. Songbuk Estate, he said. I need the exact address in 30 seconds. I need 8 men at the location before I arrive. I need the building layout, guard positions, everything. He started the engine. And if anyone in the next 3 hours says anything to me that is not directly relevant to getting her out of that building, they can find their own way back to Seoul. He drove. He did not slow down once. Back in the room, time had become strange. Adise had stopped trying to measure it. She focused on breathing instead, on keeping her face still, on the anger, which was holding up better than she'd expected. The man had not touched her yet with what he'd taken from the case. He was enjoying the anticipation of it. She understood that much. This was a performance for his own benefit. He needed her to be afraid first. He needed her to break down and beg before the rest of it. She was not going to give him that. She was not going to give him anything. You're still waiting for him, he said. He had been moving around the room, picking things up and setting them down, the behavior of someone with too much energy and no patience for it. After everything I've told you, you still believe he's coming. I know he's coming, she said. On what basis? She looked at him directly. On the basis that I know him. He laughed, the kind of laugh that was meant to diminish. You've known him for what? 2 weeks? 3? You think that's enough time to actually know a man like Park Jisoo? I think, she said carefully, that you spent 5 years trying to destroy him and you still got it wrong. So I'm not sure you're the authority on what he does or doesn't do. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not amusement anymore. Something colder. He walked toward her slowly, reached out to grip her chin again. She turned her head sharply away. His fingers closed around her jaw anyway, yanking her face back toward him. She let him hold it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she gathered everything. Every drop of rage she had been carefully banking since the moment they'd put a bag over her head in her apartment. And she kicked him as hard as she could, and she spat directly in his face. He staggered backward. His jaw was tight. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He reached up slowly and wiped his face with the back of his hand. His eyes had gone completely flat. That, he said quietly, was a mistake. He moved fast. His hand locked around her arm with a grip that was meant to bruise, and he yanked her upward, the chair tipping, the rope going taut, her whole body wrenching with the force of it. She cried out despite herself. He was saying something now, something low and vicious, the composure finally cracking, the patience finally gone. The door came off its hinges. Not opened, not kicked. Off its hinges, wood and metal and splinters, a percussive impact that rearranged the air in the room and made every single person in it freeze completely. Jisoo stood in the destroyed doorway. His jacket was gone. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbow. His knuckles were split open and bleeding. For what had happened to the doors that had come before this one, she understood. There had apparently been several. His chest rose and fell. His eyes found her immediately, moved over her fast, the arm, the wrist, her face, and then moved to the man still gripping her arm. The expression on Jisoo's face was the most frightening thing Adise had ever seen in her life. Not because it was wild, because it wasn't. It was completely controlled, completely quiet, the kind of stillness that exists just before something irreversible happens. "Let go of her," he said. His voice was almost gentle. "Now." The man released her arm. He spun around. "How did you?" "You were in Incheon. There's no possible way you." Jisoo crossed the room. 1 second, he was at the door. The next, he had the man by the throat. One hand, lifted, slammed against the wall hard enough that the artwork beside them rattled on its hooks. "You touched her." His voice was barely above a murmur. It was somehow the loudest thing in the room. "You put your hands on my wife." The man clawed at Jisoo's grip uselessly, his face changing colors. "Jisoo." Adise's voice came out broken. "Jisoo, stop." He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the man. "Jisoo, please." He looked at her, just for a second, just long enough to see the tear tracks, the way she was holding her arm against her side, the state of the rope on her wrists. The rage was still there. She could see it burning underneath everything. But something else pushed through it. He let the man go, let him fall. Then he was at her side, dropping into a crouch in front of her, his bleeding hands working at the knots in the rope with a carefulness that was almost strange to watch after what he'd just done. She watched his face while he worked, jaw tight, eyes focused, something running beneath the surface of his expression that she had never seen there before. "Are you hurt?" He was already scanning her. "Your arm. Can you feel your fingers?" "Yes." "Good." The last knot came loose. He helped her to her feet, one hand at her back, steadying her while her legs remembered how to work. She stood, and then something inside her chest came completely apart. Everything she had been holding compressed and controlled for the last several hours. The fear, the waiting, the terrible voice in the back of her mind that had said, "He isn't coming. He decided you weren't worth it. You were only ever a strategy." All of it broke open at once. She was crying before she fully understood it was happening. Properly crying, the ugly heaving kind, both hands fisting in the front of his shirt. "You left, and you didn't tell me where you were going," she said. Her voice was wrecked. "I woke up, and you were gone, and there was no message, no note, nothing. And I kept calling, and you didn't answer, and she couldn't finish. I thought you had decided it was too much, that I was too much trouble, that you'd changed your mind about all of it." His arms came around her. Tight. The particular tight of someone who has spent several hours imagining the worst and is still not entirely certain the worst didn't happen. "I know," he said low into her hair. "I know. I'm sorry. I sat in that chair, and I told myself you were probably in some boardroom somewhere, and you'd forgotten." "Adise." His arms tightened. "I thought you decided I wasn't worth the trouble." "Adise." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, both hands coming up to cup her cheeks, thumbs moving across the wet tracks there. His eyes stayed on hers, steady and direct. "I was in Incheon." She blinked. "What?" "I drove to Incheon before dawn." His voice was even, certain, to walk into the organization that has been collecting your debt and pay them off. Every cent, the original amount, the interest, the penalties, all of it. It's finished. They won't come near you. They won't say your name. It's done. Adise stared at him. The room was very quiet. Behind them, his men had subdued the man who had brought her here. She was distantly aware of sounds, movements, orders given in low voices. But none of it was as loud as the thing Jisoo had just said. "You drove to Incheon," she said slowly. "Before sunrise," he confirmed. "To pay off my debt." "Yes." "Without telling me." It was supposed to be a surprise. Something crossed his expression, a flicker of something that might, on anyone else, have been called sheepishness. "The plan was to come home tonight and take you to dinner. Tell you everything over the meal." She stared at him. "You were planning a dinner." "Overlooking the Han River." His jaw shifted. "I had the details arranged for 2 weeks." "The Han River," she repeated. "You mentioned it," he said, "in the car the night we met. And then twice more after that. I pay attention." A brief pause. The evening did not go as planned. Adise pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. "Your sister's school fees are also handled," he added. "And your mother's medication has been arranged on a monthly delivery from a pharmacy in Seoul that ships to Abaddon." The exchange rate has been locked at favorable terms for 2 years. She lowered her hand. Jisoo. And there's one more thing, he said. But I would prefer to tell you somewhere that isn't this room. Are you crying right now? Because I am. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what you're feeling right now. If you trust Park Jisoo now, type it. If you were wrong about him in the comments of part 1, own it. I want to see it. This is the part where everything changes. Don't go anywhere. The doctor came to the penthouse. Jisoo had called her before they left Songbuk. She was already waiting when they arrived, professional, thorough, clearly accustomed to being summoned at unusual hours by Park Jisoo's people, because she asked no questions about context. She examined Adise with quiet efficiency. Bruising on the arm, rope marks on the wrists. No serious damage. She said so 3 times during the examination, each time with increasing patience. Jisoo stood in the doorway the entire time, arms folded, eyes moving between the doctor's hands and Adise's face with the focused attention of a man who intended to personally verify every finding. She's going to be fine, Mr. Park, the doctor said on her way out. I heard you, he said. I wanted a second opinion. The doctor looked at him. I've said she's fine 4 times in the last 20 minutes. I appreciate your consistency, he said, still watching Adise. After the doctor left, Adise sat on the edge of the bed with a cold pack on her arm and watched him standing by the window, arms still folded, jaw still carrying the weight of the last several hours. You can stop now, she said. Can I? The crisis is over. She said, I'm fine. She said, you were fine physically, he said. The distinction was apparently important to him. Jisoo. She looked at him steadily. I'm fine every way. He turned, searched her face, then exhaled, long and slow, and some of the tension in his shoulders finally released. Her eyes caught his hands. You're bleeding on Madame Yun's carpet. He looked down. His knuckles had soaked through the makeshift bandage from the car. He looked back up. Worth it. Go put something on that. I'm monitoring. Kong Jisoo. Her voice surprised both of them with its firmness. Go and put something on your hand. He went. She listened to him moving in the bathroom, the water running, the quiet of the penthouse settling around her like something solid. She pressed the cold pack to her arm and looked at the ceiling. He had driven to Incheon before sunrise to pay off her debt. He had been planning a dinner by the Han River for 2 weeks. He had come through a door, several doors, apparently, with blood on his knuckles and fury in his eyes, and her name on his lips before the room had even finished moving. She pressed her free hand flat against her sternum, where the feeling was pooling. She didn't have a word for it yet. She was going to be very careful about giving it a word. But it was there, and it was significant, and she was done pretending it wasn't. 3 weeks passed. The bruises faded. The rope marks disappeared from her wrists. The nightmares came less frequently. Life in the penthouse found its rhythm again. Cautious, new, punctuated by the particular arguments that had become the texture of their days together. Whether Adise was permitted to go to the market alone. She was not, and she found 3 ways around it before Jisoo introduced a compromise involving a security detail in plain clothes who were instructed to stay 15 meters back. She declared this a partial victory. Whether Jisoo was allowed to work through dinner. He was not, and she enforced this with a consistency that clearly surprised him, though he would never say so. Whether the Han River had been forgotten. It had not. On a Wednesday evening, Madame Yun knocked on the door to the sitting room where Adise was reading and told her with a perfectly neutral expression that Mr. Park had requested her presence downstairs. She went down. Jisoo was standing by the door, dressed, jacket on, which was unusual for a Wednesday evening at home. He was holding a length of dark silk. She looked at the silk. What is that? Turn around, he said. Excuse me. I'm not going to explain the request. Turn around. She looked at him for a long moment. Most people start with please. I'm not most people. He held up the silk. Turn around, Adise. She turned around. His hands were careful as he tied it over her eyes, checking the knot, checking she could breathe, adjusting the edges. Then his hand found the small of her back, and his other hand found her elbow, and he guided her forward with the particular patience of someone who had thought this through. Step here, he said. 3 steps down, small ones. She found them. Almost there. She heard music. Low, sweeping, Strings, she realized. Violins. A piece she half recognized from a concert her father had taken her to years ago in Abaddon, when she was 11 and she had worn her best dress and felt, for the first time in her short life, that the world contained more beauty than she had been given access to. The kind of music that made your chest feel larger than your body. He stopped her. His hands went to the knot at the back of her head. "Ready?" he asked. "I've been in a moving car blindfolded for 20 minutes, she said. "I've been ready since Yongsan." The silk fell. Adise stopped breathing. The Han River stretched before her in the dark. And it was the Han River she had passed 100 times on buses and in taxis and through the windows of other people's lives. But it was also somehow entirely different. The lights of Seoul reflected across its surface in long, trembling ribbons of gold. And there, at the water's edge, was a table set for two. Candles everywhere. Dozens of them. Paper lanterns floating above in amber and ivory. Flowers. White ones, simple and perfect. The kind she had mentioned once in a conversation she hadn't thought anyone was listening to carefully enough to remember. The food was from 3 different restaurants she had mentioned over the past weeks. Casually, in passing, the way you mention things when you aren't asking for them. Behind the table, a string quartet played. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever been given. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. "I told you," Jisoo said from somewhere just behind her. His voice was quiet. "The river doesn't have legs." "You remembered," she said. Her voice had gone very small. "You mentioned it in the car the night everything started. You said it again 2 weeks later when we drove across the Mapo Bridge. You mentioned it last Tuesday at breakfast." A pause. "I pay attention, Adise." She turned to look at him. He was watching her with the expression she had come to know over the past weeks. The one that looked like composure, but was doing something much more complicated underneath. "Sit with me," he said. "Eat first. Then I want to tell you something." They sat. The music played. The lanterns drifted. The city blazed on the opposite bank. They ate slowly and talked about small things at first, then larger things, then the kind of things people say only when they have run out of reasons to guard themselves. The conversation moved the way conversations move when 2 people have been circling the same truth for weeks and are finally tired of circling. When the plates were nearly cleared, Jisoo set down his fork. He looked at her across the candlelight. "I want to say something," he said, "about the contract." She waited. "Why I proposed it," he said. "I told you there were limited options. That marriage was the only way to protect you." He paused. His eyes stayed steady on hers. That wasn't entirely true. There were other ways. Safe houses, relocation, security arrangements that would have kept you safe without requiring you to share your life with a man like me. She said nothing. Let him continue. "I chose this because I wanted you close." His voice was even, direct, offering the truth without decoration. "From a moment you leaned across that table in the club and whispered against my mouth, not even asking me to save you, just warning me to save myself, something shifted that I wasn't prepared for. I've spent 5 years building a life that nothing could get through. 5 years being very precise about what I allowed near me." A brief pause. "You got through all of it without even trying, without even knowing you were doing it." Adise's heart was doing something it had no business doing. "Jisoo, let me finish." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set a small box on the table between them. She looked at it, then at him. He stood, walked around the table to her side, and then, in full view of the Han River and the string quartet and the city she had come to think of as home without ever quite deciding to, Park Jisoo went down on one knee. She pressed both hands to her mouth. "I'm not interested in the contract anymore," he said. "I'm not interested in terms or end dates or arrangements. I want to do this the right way." He opened the box. The ring inside was simple. 1 stone, clean and perfect, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "Will you marry me?" Not because it's useful. Not because it protects either of us. His eyes held hers. "Because I love you. Because you're the only person I have ever met who looked at everything I am and chose to stay. Because you spat in a dangerous man's face while tied to a chair, and I'm never going to recover from that." Something moved in his expression, quieter and truer than anything she'd seen from him before. Because the world is very loud, and you're the only thing in it that makes it quiet. Adise's eyes were burning. She was trying very hard to find a word, the one she had been carefully and deliberately not finding for weeks, because finding it meant it was real, and real things could be taken away. She had found it. She had found it 3 weeks ago. Honestly, she had just been afraid of it. Yes, a voice said from somewhere behind her. A voice she knew. A voice she had not heard in over a year. A voice she had last heard crackling over a bad phone connection, frightened and apologetic, and saying goodbye in a way that it sounded like it might be permanent. She spun around so fast she nearly sent her chair sideways. Her brother stood 10 feet away in the amber light of the lanterns, older and thinner than she remembered, wearing a jacket she didn't recognize, his eyes bright with a specific emotion that only exists in the moment someone you have been grieving comes back to life in front of you. "Onika," she breathed. His name came out like a prayer. "Hey, big sis," he said. She was across the 10 feet before she had fully decided to move. She hit him hard enough that he stumbled backward, laughing, his arms coming up around her before they'd even properly landed. She held on with everything. Both arms, both hands, her face against his shoulder, the particular grip of someone who is terrified that if she loosens it, the person will dissolve. "You're here," she said. Her voice was completely gone. "You're actually here." "I'm here." His arms tightened. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." She pulled back and held his face in her hands the way their mother used to when they were small, checking, cataloging, making sure every feature was present and accounted for. "Are you okay? Are you safe? Are you?" "I'm okay." His expression was steady, gentle. "I'm safe. I'm here." "I didn't know," she said, and her voice broke completely. "For over a year, I didn't know if you were." "I know." His face shifted into something quieter, something she recognized as guilt that had been carried a long time. "I know, Adise. I'm sorry. I thought I was keeping you safe by disappearing. I thought if they couldn't find me to hurt, they'd stop coming after you." He glanced past her shoulder at the man, still waiting by the table. "I was wrong about a lot of things." She turned to look at Jisoo. He was standing where she'd left him, ring box still in his hand, expression carefully composed in the way that meant it was carrying a great deal just underneath. She walked back to him slowly. "You found him," she said. "I found him," he confirmed. "How long have you been?" 3 weeks. He said it simply. "I had people searching from the day after you told me about him. He was well hidden. A village outside Daejeon. Assumed name, changed appearance, different work." A pause. "When they located him, I went myself. I thought a stranger arriving might not be the right approach." Adise stared at him. "You went yourself?" "Yes." "To Daejeon." "Correct." "Onika," she said, without turning around. "How did that go?" From behind her, her brother let out a short laugh. "I shut the door in his face for 4 nights in a row." Jisoo nodded, as though this was a reasonable thing to report. "He did. You stood outside his door," Adise said slowly. "For 4 nights. Until he let me in," Jisoo said, "which he eventually did. Because I am patient, and also because," he glanced past her, "on the 4th night it was raining, and I brought food from a Nigerian restaurant in Daejeon." Adise turned fully around to look at her brother. "He found a Nigerian restaurant in Daejeon," Onika confirmed, expression caught between lingering suspicion and genuine admission. "Jollof rice. Proper jollof. I wasn't going to refuse jollof rice on principle." "There's a Nigerian restaurant in Daejeon," she said. "There is," Jisoo said. "It required some effort to locate. The owner was very helpful once I explained the situation." Adise looked at him. This man, this impossible, meticulous, infuriating, relentless man who had driven to Incheon before sunrise to pay off a debt without being asked, who had found a restaurant in a city 3 hours away and stood in the rain for 4 nights outside her brother's door, who had spent 2 weeks arranging a dinner beside a river she had mentioned in passing, thinking he wasn't listening. He was always listening. "How am I supposed to say no to you after all of this?" she said. "You're not," he said. He was still on one knee. He had not moved. She looked at him, at the ring still waiting in the open box, at the river behind him, enormous and shining, finally hers to sit beside. "Yes," she said. Obviously, yes. Yes. He exhaled, actually exhaled, and she realized she had never in all the weeks she'd known him heard him do that. Release a breath with that particular quality of relief. Like he had been holding it since he got down. He slid the ring onto her finger, rose to his full height, and when she tilted her face up toward him, he kissed her, carefully at first, and then not carefully at all, the way you kiss something you have been afraid of losing. Ahem, her brother said from behind them. They ignored him. I had a speech, he said. Written notes. Memorized. This is extremely rude. Jisoo lifted his head. You can give a speech at dinner. Onika pointed at him. Every word. I want you to hear every word. Every word, Jisoo agreed. They sat, all three of them, at the table beside the Han River, with the violins playing and the lanterns burning low and Seoul blazing on the water. Onika gave the speech. It was 6 minutes long, periodically consulted from a folded piece of paper he produced from a jacket pocket, and it made Adise cry twice and laugh 3 times and cover her face once. Jisoo listened to every word without checking his phone, which was, Adise thought, watching him, genuinely the most remarkable thing he had done all evening. They ate. They talked. They stayed until the candles were nearly gone, the food was finished, and the string quartet had moved to quieter pieces, the kind that didn't ask for anything, just drifted. Adise kept looking at the river, at the way the city's light moved across it in slow, shifting patterns, at this enormous, ordinary, beautiful thing she had passed 100 times without ever having the space or the time or the permission to simply stop and look. Worth it, she thought. Worth every part of the road that brought me here. She looked at Jisoo. He was already looking at her. Across the table, Onika was saying something. Something about Seoul versus Abaddon. Something warm and unhurried that floated at the edges of the evening without demanding anything. A voice she had missed for over a year. A voice that was here now. That was going to keep being here. Their hands found each other on the table. No announcement. No ceremony. Just fingers lacing together quietly, the way you touch someone when you have stopped needing to explain it. She turned back to the river. He turned with her. Everything worth having, she thought. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. Did this story break you open? Good. That means it worked. Drop your favorite moment in the comments. Mine was the 4 nights in the rain outside the door. And if yours wasn't that too, I need to understand why. Like this video if you cried when Onika walked out of the dark, screamed when Jisoo came through that door, or decided somewhere in the middle of this that you deserve someone who find a Nigerian restaurant in a city 3 hours away, just because you mentioned it once. Subscribe if you're new to this family. Turn on notifications because the next story is coming and it is not going to be gentle with your feelings. Your comments tell me what to write next. More slow burns, more dangerous men, more love that costs something real before it gives something back. Show me you're ready. Drop a comment. Share this with someone who needs a love story today. And remember, some people come into your life like a collision. The accident is just the beginning.